Gather close, traveler, for what I share with you are the echoes of our world, the whispers of the planet, its heroes and its tragedies, its battles and its sorrows. These are not merely stories, but the lifeblood of the land itself, carried through the life stream and remembered by those who still listen. Stay with me, and together we shall journey through its history, one legend at a time. And you, traveler, inscribe your mark in the journal. Tell us from which land you hail, and how many years had passed when you first heard the tales of Midgar. For your story, too, is part of the great memory. Now, let us walk back through the ages and remember what was long ago. In the beginning, there was the planet, not merely a celestial body adrift in the cosmic void, but a living entity, ancient, sentient, and flowing with the essence of life itself. Beneath its surface coursed the life stream, a luminous river of spiritual energy that connected all living things in an eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The planet breathed, it dreamed, it remembered, and from its consciousness arose the Cetra, the ancients, a people gifted with the ability to commune with the planet's very soul. The Cetra were nomads, wanderers who journeyed across the land, listening to the whispers of the planet. They cultivated life wherever they traveled, transforming barren landscapes into verdant paradises with their mystical connection to the land. They did not build permanent settlements, for they understood their purpose was to heal the planet, to journey with it through the ages, and to safeguard its wisdom. The Cetra lived in harmony with the world, taking only what they needed and returning themselves to the life stream upon death, their knowledge and experiences enriching the collective consciousness that flowed beneath the surface. But approximately 2,000 years before our tale truly begins, a calamity fell from the skies. A being from beyond the stars crashed into the northern reaches of the planet, carving a massive wound in the earth that would later be known as the Northern Crater. This entity was Genova, though the Cetra did not know its name then. They called it simply the Calamity from the Skies. Genova was a shapeshifter, a mimic, a devourer of worlds. It possessed the terrible ability to assume the form of those it had killed, infiltrating communities and sowing discord. The Cetra, sensing the malevolence of this alien presence, gathered their strength to confront it. But Genova was cunning. It unleashed a virus that infected many of the ancients, transforming them into monsters or killing them outright. Those who survived fought desperately to contain the threat. At great cost, the remaining Cetra managed to seal Genova away, imprisoning the entity beneath the ice of the northern crater. But the victory was Pyrrhic. The once numerous Cetra were decimated, their numbers reduced to a mere handful of survivors. Exhausted and diminished, they scattered across the planet. Their great migration ended. Some intermingled with another emerging species, humans, who lacked the Cetra's profound connection to the planet, but possessed remarkable adaptability and resilience. Over the centuries that followed, the Cetra declined further until they were little more than legend. Humans, meanwhile, flourished and spread across the world, building villages that grew into towns, then cities, then empires. They developed technology, art, commerce, and warfare, yet they remained largely ignorant of the sleeping threat beneath the northern ice and of the living energy that flowed beneath their feet. The memory of Genova faded into myth, and the wisdom of the Cetra was preserved only in fragments, in ancient texts and sacred sites known to but a few. Among the human settlements that arose was Midgar, initially a cluster of separate villages that eventually merged into a single sprawling metropolis. And within Midgar emerged a company that would change the course of history, the Shinra Electric Power Company. Shinra began, modestly enough, manufacturing weapons during a regional conflict, but its trajectory changed forever when its scientists discovered a method to harness the planet's energy as a power source. This energy, which they called Mako, was in truth the life stream itself. the very life essence of the planet and all who had ever lived upon it. But the Shinra scientists did not comprehend the true nature of what they were exploiting. To them, Mako was merely an efficient, seemingly inexhaustible resource. Under the leadership of President Shinra, the company constructed massive Mako reactors around Midgar, enormous technological marvels that extracted the life stream from the planet and converted it into electricity. The power these reactors generated was unprecedented, fueling a technological revolution that transformed Shinra from a weapons manufacturer into the dominant economic and political force in the world. Midgar itself was reimagined and rebuilt as a symbol of Shinra's might, a circular metropolis suspended on a massive plate above the original ground level, divided into 8 sectors radiating from a central hub where the Shinra headquarters towered. Below the plate lay the slums, where those who could not afford life above dwelled in perpetual twilight, never seeing the sun, breathing air polluted by the reactors above. As Shinra's influence grew, so too did its ambitions. The company established a military force, the peacekeeping troops known as Soldier, enhanced with Mako energy to create superhuman warriors. They expanded their reactor network to other parts of the world, in places like Coral, Gongaga, and Nibelheim. They developed new technologies, new weapons, and new methods of exploiting the planet's resources. Yet there were signs, ignored by all but a few, that this progress came at a terrible cost. The land around the reactors withered and died. Flora disappeared, fauna fled or perished, and the soil itself turned barren and gray. The planet was being drained of its lifeblood, and it was beginning to show signs of distress that only those with eyes to see could recognize. Among those few who perceived the truth was a brilliant scientist named Professor Gast Faramis, the head of Shinra's science department. Gast had long been fascinated by the legends of the Cetra, and he dedicated himself to uncovering their secrets. His research led him to the northern crater, where, approximately 30 years before our story, he discovered the preserved remains of the entity the Cetra had sealed away millennia ago. Misinterpreting the evidence before him, Gast believed he had found the remains of a Cetra, an ancient who had been preserved in the ice. He named this specimen Genova and had it transported to a Shinra facility in the remote mountain village of Nibelheim. There, in a mansion that served as a research outpost, Gast and his team, including his ambitious assistant Hojo, began to study Genova's cells, believing they were unlocking the secrets of the Cetra themselves. This misidentification, this fundamental error, would have catastrophic consequences in the years to come. From Genova's cells, Shinra scientists developed the Genova Project, an attempt to create humans with the powers of the Cetra. Gast, however, grew increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the research. Something about Genova troubled him, discrepancies in his findings that suggested this was not a Cetra at all. As his doubts grew, so did tensions with his colleagues, particularly Hojo, who saw in Genova the key to power and prestige. Gast eventually left Shinra, continuing his research independently. His journey led him to Icicle Inn in the northern continent, where he made a discovery that changed everything. A young woman named Ifalna, the last full-blooded Cetra in the world. From her, Gast learned the truth about Genova. Not an ancient, but the very calamity that had nearly destroyed the Cetra. His worst fears confirmed, Gast documented his findings, but before he could warn the world, Hojo tracked him down. By then, Gast and Ifalna had fallen in love and had a daughter named Aerith. In the confrontation that followed, Hojo killed Gast, captured Ifalna and the infant Aerith, and took them to Shinra headquarters for study. Gast's revelations about Genova's true nature were suppressed, his research confiscated, and the Genova Project continued under Hojo's direction, now the head of Shinra's science department. The Genova Project had by this time split into several branches, the most significant being Project S and Project G. led by Hojo, and a rival scientist named Hollander, respectively. Both sought to create humans imbued with Genova's power, but their methods and objectives differed in crucial ways. Project S for Sephiroth, would produce the single most important subject in the program's history, and the figure whose actions would nearly bring about the end of all life on the planet. Sephiroth was born to a Shinra scientist named Lucretia Crescent, who had volunteered to be part of Hojo's experiment while pregnant. Genova cells were injected into the fetus, and from birth, Sephiroth was raised not as a child, but as a specimen, a potential weapon of unparalleled power. His extraordinary abilities manifested early, and as he grew, Shinra recognized in him the perfect soldier, strong, intelligent, disciplined, and loyal. By his teenage years, Sephiroth had become the face of Soldier, Shinra's silver-haired champion deployed to the front lines of the Wutai War, a conflict ignited by Wutai's resistance to Shinra's plans to build a Mako reactor on their land. Sephiroth's battlefield prowess became legendary. Stories of his feats spread across the world, inspiring admiration, fear, and a generation of young men who dreamed of joining Soldier to follow in his footsteps. Yet, for all his power and acclaim, Sephiroth was a solitary figure, set apart by his abilities and the mystery of his origins. He knew nothing of Genova, nothing of the experiments that had shaped him before birth. He believed himself simply an exceptional human, the product of intensive training and natural talent. The truth was kept from him, a secret buried in Shinra's archives and in the minds of those who had created him. Among those who admired Sephiroth from afar was a young boy from the mountain village of Nibelheim, the same village where the Shinra mansion housed the hidden laboratory where Genova was kept. This boy, Cloud Strife, grew up in the shadow of Mount Nibel, raised by a single mother in a community that never fully accepted him. Small for his age and often bullied, Cloud found in the stories of Sephiroth a model of strength and recognition that he desperately craved. Cloud's childhood was further complicated by his relationship with a neighbor girl named Tifa Lockhart. Tifa was popular and well-liked, the daughter of the village mayor, and though Cloud admired her from a distance, they were not close friends. When Tifa's mother died, Cloud followed her as she ventured up the dangerous paths of Mount Nibel, believing her mother's spirit had gone to the other side of the mountain. When Tifa fell and was injured during this journey, the villagers blamed Cloud, driving him further into isolation. At the age of 14, determined to prove himself and become like his hero Sephiroth, Cloud left Nibelheim for Midgar, promising Tifa that he would return as a member of Soldier. It was a promise made beneath the stars, at the village water tower, a promise that would haunt him in the years to come. But Cloud's dream would not be realized as he had hoped. Though he joined Shinra's military program, he failed to qualify for Soldier, becoming instead a simple infantryman, one of the countless helmeted guards that made up Shinra's regular army. The enhancement process for Soldier was selective, and not all who aspired to join its ranks were deemed suitable for Mako infusion. Still, Cloud persevered, serving with distinction if not recognition, harboring his disappointment privately while maintaining his ambition. It was during this time that he befriended another aspiring soldier, a young man named Zack Fair. Unlike Cloud, Zack had succeeded in joining Soldier, rising quickly through its ranks with his exceptional skills and indomitable optimism. Zack became a first-class soldier, one of the elite, and a protege of Sephiroth himself. Zack's friendship was a bright spot in Cloud's otherwise difficult adjustment to life in Shinra's military. Zack saw potential in the quiet, determined infantryman that others overlooked, and he encouraged Cloud to persist despite his setbacks. This friendship would prove to be of profound importance in the events that were to follow. For while Cloud was struggling to find his place in Shinra's hierarchy, forces were in motion that would soon bring him face to face with his idol, Sephiroth. Not as a comrade, but as witness to a tragedy that would alter the course of both their lives forever. The catalyst for this convergence was a series of equipment malfunctions at the Mako reactor near Nibelheim. In response, Shinra dispatched a small team to investigate. Sephiroth, Zack Fair, and 2 infantrymen, one of whom was Cloud Strife. For Cloud, it was a bittersweet homecoming, returning not as the soldier he had promised to become, but as an anonymous guard, his face hidden behind a helmet, his failure concealed but keenly felt. Upon arriving in Nibelheim, Sephiroth inquired about the reactor and arranged for a local guide to lead them up the treacherous mountain paths. That guide was Tifa Lockhart, now 16 and an accomplished martial artist trained by a man named Zangan. Though Tifa recognized Zack as a soldier by his uniform, she did not recognize Cloud, who kept his helmet on and his identity hidden, too ashamed to reveal himself to her. As they ascended Mount Nibel, the group encountered the natural Mako fountains that had led Shinra to build a reactor there in the first place, places where the life stream rose close to the surface, glowing with ethereal light. These manifestations of the planet's energy had once been revered as sacred by the people of Nibelheim, but now they were merely resources to be exploited. At the reactor, Sephiroth discovered the source of the malfunctions and something far more disturbing: pods containing humanoid creatures, twisted and malformed by Mako exposure. These were failed experiments, humans subjected to high concentrations of Mako energy and Genova cells in Hojo's ongoing research. The sight of these abominations troubled Sephiroth deeply, stirring questions about the nature of Soldier and the enhancement process he himself had undergone. But it was what lay beyond the pod chamber that truly shattered Sephiroth's world. In a sealed room at the heart of the reactor, he found a mechanical construct labeled Genova, and within it, the preserved remains of the alien entity the Cetra had sealed away millennia ago. The entity that Shinra had mistaken for an ancient. The entity whose cells flowed in Sephiroth's veins. Something in that encounter, whether a telepathic connection to Genova or simply the shocking implications of what he saw, triggered a profound crisis in Sephiroth. He withdrew from the others, locking himself in the basement library of the Shinra mansion in Nibelheim. There, among Professor Gast's records and Hojo's research notes, Sephiroth spent 7 days and nights reading without rest, consuming every scrap of information about the Genova project, the Cetra, and his own origins. What he read was fragmentary, often misleading, and tainted by Hojo's distortions of Gast's original research. Sephiroth came to believe that he was the descendant of the Cetra, that humans were traitors who had abandoned the ancients in their time of need, and that Genova, whom he now believed to be his mother, was the last of the Cetra. The truth that Genova was the very calamity that had nearly destroyed the Cetra was hidden from him, either deliberately by Hojo or through the incompleteness of the records. Driven by this newfound purpose and burning with rage at what he perceived as betrayal, Sephiroth emerged from the mansion on the 7th night. In the grip of madness, he set Nibelheim ablaze, cutting down any villagers who crossed his path as he made his way to the reactor and his mother. Cloud, who had remained in the village while Sephiroth sequestered himself, witnessed the inferno and rushed to his childhood home, finding his mother dead among the flames. Grief-stricken and enraged, Cloud pursued Sephiroth up the mountain, following a trail of blood and destruction. At the reactor, he found Tifa kneeling over the body of her father, who had followed Sephiroth to confront him for the destruction of the village. Sephiroth had cut him down without mercy. Taking up her father's sword, Tifa attacked Sephiroth in a fury of grief, but she was no match for the soldier. Sephiroth struck her down with a single slash, leaving her grievously wounded. Zack arrived next, having also followed Sephiroth from the burning village. As a first-class soldier, Zack posed more of a challenge. but even he was ultimately overpowered by Sephiroth's unnatural strength and skill. Wounded and unable to continue fighting, Zack could only watch as Cloud arrived, taking up Zack's massive Buster Sword. Driven by rage, grief, and perhaps something more, some reaction of the Genova cells that Hojo would later inject into him, Cloud confronted Sephiroth at the threshold of Genova's chamber. Despite being merely an infantryman facing the most powerful soldier ever created, Cloud caught Sephiroth off guard. In a moment that would be obscured and distorted in Cloud's memory for years to come, he impaled Sephiroth with the Buster Sword. Wounded but not defeated, Sephiroth severed Genova's mechanical containment from its moorings and, clutching what he believed to be his mother's remains, leapt into the Mako-filled abyss below the reactor. He was presumed dead, his body dissolving in the concentrated life stream. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Cloud collapsed from his injuries. The Nibelheim incident was over, but its consequences had only begun to unfold. Shinra, arriving to assess the situation, enacted a cover-up of staggering proportions. The company could not allow the world to learn that their greatest hero had gone rogue and destroyed an entire village. Nibelheim was rebuilt, populated with Shinra employees instructed to act as if they had always lived there. Records were altered, witnesses silenced, and the truth buried. As for the survivors, Zack and Cloud, both grievously wounded, they became subjects in a new phase of Hojo's experiments. For 4 years, they were held in the basement of the reconstructed Shinra mansion, subjected to Mako infusions and Genova cell injections. Tifa, having been found and healed by her martial arts teacher Zangan, was taken away from Nibelheim before Shinra's cleanup crew arrived. She eventually made her way to Midgar, believing Cloud and everyone else from her village to be dead. The experiments had different effects on Zack and Cloud. Zack, already having undergone the soldier enhancement process, was resilient to the additional procedures. Cloud, however, suffered severe Mako poisoning, his mind fractured under the strain, his memories becoming distorted and intermingled with Zack's stories about his life as a soldier. Eventually, Zack managed to break them both out of the Shinra mansion. Carrying the catatonic Cloud, Zack fled across continents, pursued by Shinra troops under orders to eliminate the escaped specimens. As they neared Midgar, their destination and Zack's hope for sanctuary, they were finally cornered by Shinra forces on the bluffs overlooking the city. Despite his soldier training and enhancements, Zack could not overcome the sheer number of troops sent to capture them. In a last stand that would never be recorded in Shinra's official histories, Zack Fair fought to protect the still unresponsive Cloud, cutting down dozens of infantrymen before finally being overwhelmed and shot repeatedly. As Zack lay dying in the rain, Cloud, stirred to consciousness by the sounds of battle, crawled to his friend's side. With his last breath, Zack entrusted Cloud with his dreams, his honor, and his Buster Sword. "For both of us," he told Cloud, "you'll be my living legacy." The Shinra troops, believing both targets eliminated or as good as dead, withdrew. Left alone with the body of his friend and the weight of a legacy he didn't fully understand, Cloud's fractured mind attempted to make sense of the trauma he had endured. In his confusion and grief influenced by the Mako poisoning and Genova cells, Cloud constructed a new identity for himself, one in which he had been the soldier first class, not Zack, one in which he had returned to Nibelheim as a hero, not as a failed aspirant hiding behind a helmet. This false identity was not a conscious deception but a protective mechanism, a way for Cloud's shattered psyche to cope with unbearable loss and failure. The memories of Zack became subsumed into Cloud's own narrative, details of his friend's life and experiences becoming, in Cloud's mind, his own. Stumbling into Midgar, with Zack's sword on his back and a head full of borrowed memories, Cloud reinvented himself as an ex-soldier turned mercenary. It was in this capacity that he was approached by Tifa Lockhart, now a bartender in the Sector 7 slums and a member of an eco-terrorist group called Avalanche, who recognized him as her childhood friend but was puzzled by his claims of having been in SOLDIER. Tifa, sensing something wrong but unable to identify what, kept her concerns to herself. She introduced Cloud to Barrett Wallace, the leader of Avalanche, and convinced him to hire Cloud for an upcoming mission, the bombing of Mako Reactor 1. And so our tale truly begins, with a broken man carrying another man's sword and memories, a woman harboring suspicions and her own unresolved trauma, and a mission that would spark a chain of events leading to a confrontation with forces beyond human comprehension. The bombing of Mako Reactor 1 was intended as a statement, a violent but necessary action, in Avalanche's view, to draw attention to Shinra's exploitation of the planet. The small cell, consisting of Barrett, Tifa, Cloud, and a few others, including the technically minded Jessie, the robust Biggs, and the gentle giant Wedge, infiltrated the reactor and planted explosives at its core. The resulting destruction exceeded their expectations and their intentions. While Avalanche had aimed to damage the reactor's Mako processing capabilities, the explosion caused widespread destruction in the surrounding sector, claiming civilian lives and turning public opinion against them. This outcome would haunt the group, particularly Barrett, who had to reconcile his passionate belief in their cause with the unintended consequences of their methods. Undeterred, Avalanche proceeded with a second bombing mission targeting Mako Reactor 5. It was during the infiltration of this reactor that Cloud experienced the first of many hallucinations or visions that would plague him throughout his journey, momentary glimpses of Sephiroth, whom he believed dead, and cryptic utterances that left him disoriented and confused. The mission went awry when Shinra sprung a trap, having anticipated Avalanche's attack. President Shinra himself appeared via hologram to taunt the eco-terrorists before triggering a mechanical guardian, the Airbuster, to eliminate them. Though Cloud and his companions defeated the machine, the battle left Cloud dangling from a damaged section of the reactor. Before his companions could reach him, the section gave way, and Cloud plummeted into the slums below. Cloud's fall should have been fatal, but he survived, landing in a bed of flowers growing in an abandoned church in the Sector 5 slums. The flowers, a rarity in the polluted Undercity, were tended by a young woman named Aerith Gainsborough, the same Aerith who, as an infant, had been taken with her mother Ifalna by Hojo after Gast's murder. Aerith had not remained Hojo's captive for long. When she was 7 years old, Ifalna, dying from the experiments performed on her, had managed to escape with Aerith from the Shinra building. They fled to Midgar's train station, where Ifalna, with her last strength, entrusted Aerith to a woman named Elmira Gainsborough before returning to the life stream. Elmira raised Aerith as her own daughter, though it soon became apparent that the girl was special. Aerith could hear voices that others could not, the whispers of the planet and the echoes of those who had returned to the life stream. Though only half Cetra, she had inherited her mother's connection to the planet, a connection that made her both precious and dangerous in Shinra's eyes. The Turks, Shinra's suited operatives specializing in reconnaissance and less-than-legal operations, had been tasked with keeping an eye on Aerith and eventually bringing her back into Shinra's custody. But their leader, Tseng, had developed a complex relationship with his target over the years, sometimes protecting her from the very company he served, delaying her capture while maintaining the pretense of surveillance. When Cloud crashed into her church, Aerith recognized in him something familiar, perhaps the Mako glow in his eyes that marked him as someone exposed to the life stream, perhaps something deeper. Despite the danger he potentially represented, she asked for his protection when the Turks, led by Reno, arrived to take her into custody. Cloud, still disoriented from his fall and the strange visions that had preceded it, agreed to be Aerith's bodyguard. Together they escaped the church and made their way through the labyrinthine slums of Sector 5 to Aerith's home, where Elmira reluctantly provided shelter to the strange, sword-carrying man her adopted daughter had brought home. It was here that Cloud learned more about Aerith's unique heritage, though neither she nor Elmira spoke directly of the Cetra. Cloud also shared his intention to return to Tifa and the others in Sector 7, a plan complicated by the labyrinthine layout of Midgar's Undercity and the monsters that roamed its darker corners. Aerith offered to guide Cloud back to Sector 7, a journey that took them through the Wall Market, a notorious red light district in Sector 6 known for its lawlessness and vice. Their passage through this seedy area was complicated when they spotted Tifa being taken to the mansion of Don Corneo, a lecherous crime lord with connections to Shinra. To infiltrate Corneo's mansion and rescue Tifa, Cloud was forced to disguise himself as a woman, a humiliating but necessary deception that, years later, he would refuse to acknowledge or discuss. Together with Aerith, also disguised as one of Corneo's potential brides, Cloud managed to reach Tifa, who revealed she had infiltrated the mansion deliberately to gather information. Don Corneo, under threat from Cloud's sword, disclosed a disturbing plan. Shinra intended to collapse the Sector 7 plate onto the slums below, crushing Avalanche's hideout and everyone in the vicinity. The plan was to be blamed on Avalanche, turning public opinion decisively against the eco-terrorists. Rushing to prevent this catastrophe, Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith fought their way to the Sector 7 pillar, where Barrett and the remaining Avalanche members were already engaged in a desperate defense against Shinra's forces. Despite their efforts, they arrived too late to save Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie, who fell one by one in the battle. As Shinra's plan reached its final stage, Reno of the Turks activated the mechanism that would detach the plate from its supports. In the chaos, Aerith was captured by Tseng, who departed in a helicopter with his prize. The last Cetra finally returned to Shinra's grasp. With moments to spare, Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett escaped on a cable as the massive plate crashed down, obliterating the Sector 7 slums and thousands of innocent lives. The survivors, grieving and enraged, made their way to Aerith's house in Sector 5, which had been spared the destruction. There, Elmira revealed more about Aerith's heritage and the likely reason for her capture. Her Cetra blood made her uniquely valuable to Shinra. Determined to rescue Aerith and driven by personal vendettas against Shinra, the three infiltrated the company's towering headquarters in the center of Midgar. Fighting their way up through the building's 60 floors, they encountered various Shinra employees and executives, including the space program director Palmer, the head of weapons development Scarlet, the head of urban development Reeve Tuesti, who showed unexpected sympathy for the victims of the plate collapse, and the odious head of the science department, Professor Hojo. It was Hojo who revealed Shinra's plans for Aerith. As the last Cetra, she was the key to finding the Promised Land, a place of legend that Shinra believed to be rich in Mako energy. President Shinra dreamed of building a new city there, a Neo-Midgar where Mako would flow abundantly, ensuring the company's power for generations to come. In the laboratory levels of the Shinra building, the group also encountered a specimen labeled Genova, headless now, but still preserved in a tank. The sight triggered another of Cloud's episodes, a momentary dissociation that left his companions concerned and confused. They found Aerith imprisoned in one of Hojo's specimen chambers, but before they could complete her rescue, they were captured and imprisoned themselves. Their incarceration was short-lived, however, as they awoke to find their cell doors mysteriously open and the Shinra guards slaughtered, not liberated, but killed with precision and cruelty that spoke of a powerful and merciless intruder. Following a trail of blood to President Shinra's office, they discovered the corporate leader impaled on a long, thin sword, a sword that Cloud recognized immediately as belonging to Sephiroth. The silver-haired soldier, believed dead for 5 years, had returned and struck at the heart of Shinra's power. In the confusion that followed, the group, now including Aerith, managed to escape from the Shinra building, pursued by Rufus Shinra, the president's son and immediate successor, and more of the Turks. Their flight from Midgar took them onto the unfinished highway system, where they fought off Shinra's forces before descending to the wastelands surrounding the city. It was at this point, standing at the edge of the unknown with Midgar at their backs, that Cloud shared what he knew of Sephiroth's apparent return and the potential threat he posed. Aerith, drawing on her connection to the planet, sensed that Sephiroth's intentions were dire and extended beyond mere vengeance against Shinra. The group resolved to pursue Sephiroth, each for their own reasons. Cloud to confront the man who had destroyed his hometown and to resolve the strange connection he felt to him. Tifa to avenge her father and her village. Barrett to continue the fight against Shinra and to protect the planet for the sake of his adopted daughter Marlene. And Aerith to prevent whatever calamity Sephiroth's return might herald. Their journey would take them far beyond the confines of Midgar, across continents and oceans, through ancient forests and desolate deserts, over mountains and into the depths of the planet itself. Along the way, they would be joined by others whose paths intersected with Sephiroth's wake of destruction. Yuffie Kisaragi, a young ninja and materia hunter from Wutai. Red Third, a sentient, lion-like being who was another of Hojo's specimens. Kate Sith, a robotic cat operated remotely by a Shinra executive with a conscience. And Sid Highwind, a foul-mouthed pilot whose dreams of space exploration had been crushed by Shinra's changing priorities. Together, this unlikely company would uncover the truth about Sephiroth, about Jenova, about the Cetra, and about Cloud himself, a truth more complex and troubling than any of them could have imagined. Their pursuit of Sephiroth led them first to the mining town of Kalm, where Cloud shared his version of the Nibelheim incident with his companions, a version that, unknown to him, was fatally flawed by his fractured memories and borrowed identity. From there, they tracked Sephiroth's movements across the eastern continent, following reports of a man in a black cape. Their journey took them through the Mithril mines, where they encountered the Turks, who were also pursuing Sephiroth for Shinra's purposes. Emerging on the other side, they traversed the Great Plains to the farming village of Chocobil, where they acquired chocobos, large bird-like creatures used as mounts, to cross the marshes where a deadly serpent called the Midgar Zolom hunted. They arrived to find one of these fearsome beasts impaled on a tree, another sign of Sephiroth's passage and his formidable power. Beyond the marshes lay the Mithril mines, and beyond them the town of Junon, a Shinra military base built above a former fishing village. Here, they rescued a young girl named Priscilla from a sea monster, earning the gratitude of the oppressed villagers living beneath Junon's mechanical shadow. With their help, the group infiltrated the military base above, arriving in the midst of preparations for a welcoming ceremony for the new Shinra president, Rufus. Disguised as Shinra troops, Cloud and his companions managed to board a cargo ship bound for the western continent. Aboard the ship, they discovered more of Sephiroth's handiwork, crew members slaughtered, and another fragment of Jenova left behind, which transformed into a monstrous entity that attacked them before being dispatched. Landing at Costa del Sol, a resort town on the western continent, they continued their pursuit through the mountains, past the North Corel ruins, once Barrett's hometown, destroyed by Shinra after a reactor explosion that Barrett had indirectly facilitated by supporting Shinra's initial overtures, and on to the Gold Saucer, a massive entertainment complex built above the desert prison of Corel. It was in the Gold Saucer that they encountered Kate Sith, who insinuated himself into their group, and where Barrett confronted his past in the form of his former friend Dyne, driven mad by the loss of his wife, his hand, and his home. After a sorrowful confrontation that ended with Dyne's suicide, Barrett inherited Dyne's responsibility for his daughter Marl. At the Gold Saucer, Barrett inherited Dyne's responsibility for his daughter Marlene, the child he had been raising as his own since Coral's destruction. This encounter forced Barrett to confront his guilt over his role in his hometown's fate and strengthened his resolve to protect the planet for Marlene's future. Leaving the Gold Saucer, the group journeyed through the Cosmo Canyon region, home to an observatory and settlement dedicated to planetary studies. Here, Red Threat, or Nanaki as he was known to his people, confronted his own painful past and the legacy of his father, Seto, whom he had believed a coward but discovered had died heroically defending the canyon from hostile tribes. From the elders of Cosmo Canyon, particularly the wise Bugenhagen, the group learned more about the life stream and the planet's precarious state due to Shinra's Mako extraction. Their path then led them to Nibelheim, which Cloud and Tifa were shocked to find intact and populated, contradicting Cloud's account of its destruction. The town appeared undamaged, with no residents acknowledging any fire or attack 5 years prior. Black-cloaked figures, victims of Hojo's experiments, injected with Genova cells and drawn to Sephiroth by a mysterious connection, wandered the reconstructed village, muttering about a reunion. In the rebuilt Shinra mansion, the group discovered Vincent Valentine locked in a coffin in the basement, a former Turk who had been subjected to horrific experiments by Hojo decades earlier. Vincent, harboring guilt over his failure to prevent Lucretia Crescent's involvement in the experiments that produced Sephiroth, joined their quest, seeing in it a chance for atonement. The revelations at Nibelheim deeply disturbed Cloud, whose memories of the incident did not align with the reality before him. His confusion deepened when they reached Mount Nibel and the reactor where he had confronted Sephiroth 5 years earlier. There, another black-cloaked figure revealed that Cloud had never been in Soldier, a statement that shook Cloud's already fragile sense of self. Crossing the mountains to Rocket Town, they met Sid Highwind, whose dreams of space exploration had been crushed when Shinra abandoned their space program. The rocket that had been Sid's pride now stood rusting and tilted, a monument to abandoned ambitions. Despite his bitterness, Sid joined their group after an encounter with Rufus Shinra and the Turks, who had come seeking Sid's airplane, the Tiny Bronco. With the Tiny Bronco, damaged in their escape but still able to navigate shallow water, the group gained greater mobility. They investigated the Temple of the Ancients, an ancient Cetra structure that Sephiroth sought for reasons then unclear. Inside the temple, through murals and the whispers Aerith could hear, they learned of a catastrophic spell called Meteor, capable of causing devastating damage to the planet. Sephiroth's plan became clear. He intended to use the black materia housed within the temple to summon Meteor, creating a wound in the planet so severe that the life stream would gather to heal it. In the chaos of that convergence, Sephiroth planned to position himself at the center, absorbing the life stream's power and becoming a god. The temple itself was the black materia, shrinking as puzzles within it were solved. Cloud, believing himself in control of his actions, solved the puzzles and obtained the black materia, only to suffer another episode in Sephiroth's presence. Under Sephiroth's influence, Cloud handed over the black materia and, in a moment of Genova-induced madness, attacked Aerith before being stopped by his companions. Shaken by his lack of control and the harm he had nearly done to Aerith, Cloud retreated into himself. During this period of introspection, Aerith departed from the group alone, telling them she was the only one who could stop Sephiroth. She traveled to the forgotten capital, the abandoned city of the Cetra in the northern continent. The group pursued her, guided by a vision Cloud experienced. They found her in an ancient structure, kneeling in prayer on a dais surrounded by water. As Cloud approached her, he was seized by another episode, drawing his sword and nearly striking her down before his companion's intervention broke Sephiroth's hold on him. But the reprieve was momentary. Sephiroth, or rather, a manifestation of Genova assuming Sephiroth's form, descended from above. With terrible precision, he impaled Aerith through the back with his Masamune. Her ribbon unraveled, A small white materia, the holy materia, which she had been praying to activate as a counter to Meteor, fell into the water and sank from sight. Aerith collapsed, her life fading as Cloud caught her in his arms. There was no dramatic final speech, no prolonged farewell, only the peaceful expression on her face as her consciousness returned to the life stream. In grief and rage, Cloud and his companions fought and defeated the Genova creature that had taken Sephiroth's form, but the victory was hollow. They laid Aerith's body to rest in the waters of the forgotten capital. Cetra returned to the planet she had tried to protect. The loss of Aerith was a profound blow to the group, particularly to Cloud, who was consumed by guilt over his inability to protect her and his moments of lost control. Yet her death also hardened their resolve to stop Sephiroth and avenge her sacrifice. Their pursuit led them to the frigid northern crater, where Sephiroth awaited. En route, they passed through Icicle Inn, where they learned more about Professor Gast and Ifalna through video recordings left behind, and traversed the Great Glacier and the Gaia's cliffs to reach the crater's edge. Within the northern crater, amidst swirling Mako energies and alien formations, they confronted Sephiroth again. But this confrontation led to another revelation that shattered Cloud's world. Through a series of illusions or memories, Sephiroth, or perhaps Cloud's own fractured psyche, revealed the truth of the Nibelheim incident. Cloud had indeed been present, not as a soldier first class, but as one of the anonymous infantrymen accompanying Sephiroth and Zack. It was Zack who had lived the experiences that Cloud now claimed as his own. Cloud, after being wounded by Sephiroth, had somehow managed to catch the soldier off guard and cast him into the Mako below the reactor, an act of unexpected strength born perhaps from desperation, perhaps from the Genova cells that would later be injected into him. This revelation, that his identity was partially constructed from borrowed memories, combined with Sephiroth's manipulation and the influence of the Genova cells within him, caused Cloud's fragile sense of self to collapse entirely. In his moment of greatest vulnerability, he surrendered the black materia, which the group had reclaimed, to Sephiroth. With the black materia in his possession, Sephiroth revealed his true form, not the black-cloaked figure they had been pursuing, which was merely another Genova fragment animated by Sephiroth's will, but his original body, preserved in a crystalline cocoon of Mako at the crater's heart. As Cloud was drawn into the lifestream, Sephiroth activated the black materia. The summoning of Meteor began, and the crater's instability triggered a massive Mako eruption. The remaining members of the group were rescued by the Shinra airship Highwind, commanded by Sid, and now under their control, but Cloud was lost in the eruption. In the chaos, they were captured by Shinra forces, who had also come to the crater to confront Sephiroth. Imprisoned in Junon, they witnessed from their cells the appearance of Meteor in the sky. A blazing red orb, visible even in daylight, growing larger each day as it approached the planet. They also learned of a new threat. The weapons, massive creatures created by the planet itself as a defense mechanism, now awakened by the imminent danger Meteor represented. Escaping during a weapon attack on Junon, the group reclaimed the Highwind and began searching for Cloud, eventually discovering him in the remote village of Midil, suffering from severe Mako poisoning. His mind shattered by the revelations about his identity and his immersion in the life stream, Cloud was reduced to a catatonic state, capable only of incoherent babbling. Tifa remained with him while the others continued their efforts against Shinra and the approaching Meteor. When another weapon attacked Midil, the ground beneath the village collapsed, plunging both Cloud and Tifa into the lifestream below. Within the lifestream, Tifa entered Cloud's subconscious, navigating the fractured landscape of his memories. Together, they reconstructed the truth of his past, his childhood in Nibelheim, his failure to join Soldier, his presence as an infantryman during the Nibelheim incident, his friendship with Zack, and the experiments they endured under Hojo. Most crucially, Cloud confronted the memory of Zack's death and his subsequent assumption of Zack's identity, not as a deliberate deception, but as a psychological defense mechanism triggered by trauma, Mako poisoning, and the influence of Genova cells. By accepting these painful truths, Cloud was able to reconstruct his true self, not the idealized soldier he had pretended to be, but a man who had shown remarkable strength in surviving horrors that would have broken most others. Emerging from the live stream with his true identity restored, Cloud rejoined the group as its leader, his resolve strengthened by clarity of purpose. The fight was now threefold: to stop Meteor, to neutralize the rampaging weapons, and to defeat Sephiroth, whose consciousness still existed within the life stream, manipulating events from afar. The group learned from Bugenhagen that Aerith had succeeded in summoning Holy before her death, but Sephiroth was blocking its release from within the planet. To give Holy a chance to counter Meteor, they would need to defeat Sephiroth himself. Their path led them to confront Shinra one last time. Rufus appeared to be killed during a weapon attack on the new Shinra headquarters, and Professor Hojo, revealed to be Sephiroth's biological father, was defeated as he attempted to increase Sephiroth's power by directing Mako to the northern crater, in a final act of defiance against the son who had never known him and the scientific ambition that had consumed his humanity. Hojo had injected himself with Genova cells, transforming into a monstrous entity before being put down by Cloud and his companions. With Shinra effectively dismantled, the group focused on their ultimate goal: returning to the northern crater to confront Sephiroth. As Meteor drew ever closer, causing panic worldwide, they each faced the possibility that they might not return from this final mission. In a moment of quiet before the final battle, they scattered briefly to resolve personal matters and contemplate what they were fighting for. For some, like Barrett, it was the future of a specific person, his daughter Marlene. For others, like Red 13, it was the continuation of his species and the legacy of his ancestors. For Tifa, it was the possibility of a life beyond revenge, perhaps with Cloud. And for Cloud himself, it was a chance at redemption, for his failures, for the harm caused by his unwitting deceptions, and for the loss of Aerith, whom he had been powerless to save. Reunited on the Highwind, they returned to the northern crater, now a maelstrom of Mako energy as the planet reacted to Meteor's approach. Descending into the crater, they fought their way past manifestations of Genova and through layers of illusion created by Sephiroth's will. At the crater's heart, they found not Sephiroth's physical form, but a series of transformations. From the winged angel form that represented his self-image to a grotesque, chimeric entity that embodied his fusion with Genova and his corrupt ambition. Through these battles, Cloud felt Sephiroth's presence more directly than his companions, the Genova cells within him resonating with the power they confronted. After defeating these physical manifestations, Cloud felt a final summons, a pull into a metaphysical space where Sephiroth awaited in his human form. Here, separated from his companions, Cloud faced his nemesis one last time. The battle transcended physical combat, becoming a contest of will as much as of strength. With the memories of all he had lost and all he still fought to protect filling him, Cloud unleashed his ultimate limit break, Omnislash, against Sephiroth. The series of decisive blows struck not just at Sephiroth's form, but at his very existence within the life stream. Defeated, Sephiroth's consciousness began to dissipate. In a final act of defiance, he reached for Cloud with his remaining strength, but Cloud's own will, now unshakable, resisted. Sephiroth dissolved into the life stream. His threat ended, at least for a time. With Sephiroth defeated, the barrier blocking Holy was removed. The white magic Aerith had summoned with her final prayer was released, rushing outward to confront Meteor, which now hung directly over Midgar, its gravitational pull already tearing at the city's superstructure. Cloud and his companions escaped the collapsing crater aboard the High Wind, watching from a distance as Holy intercepted Meteor. But the forces unleashed by their collision proved too chaotic, too destructive. Holy, designed to protect the planet from harm, struggled against Meteor's power. The conflict between these forces threatened to be as destructive as Meteor alone. In this moment of crisis, something remarkable occurred. From across the planet, streams of ethereal green energy emerged from the ground, from the oceans, from every place where the life stream flowed close to the surface. These streams converged on the conflict between Holy and Meteor, enveloping both in a luminous web of life energy. Among those watching, Red the Third recognized what they were seeing. The life stream itself had risen to the planet's defense, guided by an unseen will. Though none in the group spoke it aloud, they felt Aerith's presence in this manifestation. Her consciousness returned to the life stream, guiding it to protect the world she had given her life to save. The combined power of Holy and the life stream finally overcame Meteor, dispersing its energy and preventing the catastrophic impact Sephiroth had intended. Midgar was severely damaged in the conflict, but the planet itself was spared. In the aftermath, as the group parted ways to help rebuild or to find their own paths forward, the planet began to heal. The immediate threat had passed, but the legacy of Shinra's exploitation remained in the form of depleted Mako reserves and landscapes devastated by the weapons rampages and Meteor's near impact. 500 years later, as shown in a glimpse of the distant future, Red Thurine, whose species enjoyed lifespans far beyond human years, and his cubs looked out over the ruins of Midgar, now overgrown with vegetation. Nature had reclaimed the once mighty city, healing the wound that human ambition had inflicted upon the land. This epilogue offered both hope and ambiguity. Hope that life would continue, that the planet would recover from humanity's exploitation. Ambiguity in whether humanity itself had survived or had, like Midgar, passed into history, leaving the world to heal in its absence. The legend of Cloud Strife, Aerith Gainsborough, and their companions would live on, not as a simple tale of heroes defeating a villain, but as a complex narrative of identity, sacrifice, and the interconnectedness of all living things through the life stream. Their story would be a reminder that true strength comes not from power over others or over nature, but from the connections between people and their willingness to protect what they love, even at great personal cost. In the flow of the life stream, where all consciousness eventually returns, perhaps Aerith and Zack found each other again. Perhaps Cloud and his companions, when their time came, rejoined them in that spiritual river that connects all life, past and future. Perhaps in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth that the Cetra understood so well, their souls would one day return to a healed world, to live again under clearer skies. Or perhaps, as some whispered, Sephiroth's consciousness too remained within the life stream, diminished but not destroyed, waiting for another opportunity to fulfill his dark ambitions. For as long as the memory of Jenova remained within the planet's consciousness, the potential for her influence to resurface would remain, a shadow over the hard-won peace, a reminder that vigilance was the price of harmony with the planet. But that is a story for another time, another chronicle in the vast tapestry of the planet's history. For now, let us remember the journey of Cloud Strife, a broken man who found his true self, of Aerith Gainsborough, last of the Cetra, who gave her life to save the world she loved, of Tifa Lockhart, whose steadfast heart helped restore a shattered identity, of Barrett Wallace, who fought for his daughter's future, and of all the others who stood against Sephiroth's madness and Shinra's greed. Let us remember how the planet itself rose in its own defense, guided by the spirits of those who had returned to it. Let us contemplate the life stream, the river of souls that connects all living things across time and space, binding the planet and its children in an eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. and let us consider our own world, our own choices, and the legacies we will leave behind when we, too, return to the great flow of life that sustains all existence. For in the end, that is the true message hidden within this epic tale, that we are all connected, all responsible for the planet we inhabit and for each other, and that our actions, for good or ill, ripple outward through time in ways we can scarcely imagine. As the Cetra understood, we are not separate from the land we walk upon or the air we breathe. We are threads in a vast tapestry, notes in an eternal song, drops in the endless river that is life itself. And in that understanding lies the wisdom to avoid the fate that befell the world of Final Fantasy VII. A world brought to the brink of destruction by those who forgot this fundamental truth. In the green glow of the life stream, in the quiet prayer of a flower girl in an abandoned church, in the resolve of a failed soldier who found his true strength, there lies a hope for a different path, a different future, a future where life flourishes in harmony with the planet, where the cycle continues unbroken, where the river flows ever onward, carrying the memories, dreams, and souls of all who have lived and loved beneath the wide and forgiving sky. And so, traveler, the tale draws to its end, for now. The planet still whispers, and many legends remain yet untold. May the memory of what you've heard tonight stay with you on your journey. Before you depart, add your thoughts to the journal. Share what this adventure stirred within you, what paths it reminded you of, or what questions now linger in your mind. In this way, your reflections become part of the story itself. Return when the fire is lit again, and together we shall remember more of what has been. Until then, safe travels, wherever the life stream may guide you.